Hey Jasmine, how are you? Well, let's see. Why did my music just stop? Great. And all my visuals are gone. Yay! Oh, lovely. Bear with me, guys, while I fix some things here. Just everything's freezing. Oh, it's gonna be one of those nights. It is gonna be one of those nights. It's Friday. I don't know how good of a Friday it is, but it is definitely Friday. Alrighty. Yeah, that's gonna be a fun Saturday. Oh, I will, I'll explain. It just give me a couple minutes here to get everything squared up. Rita, the air by me is, not horrible. But it's not great. The last couple of days we've been getting some pretty severe oh, Care Bear, I really appreciate you. Thank you. Yeah, I've been doing the same thing. It's fortunately, you know, I go from the house to the car, which I just changed the cabin air filter not too long ago, so that's not too bad, but yeah. But yeah, I think we hit our air quality index hit like 250 or something like that yesterday. It was really bad. So how are you doing, Sunshine? It's good to see you. If I seem highly disorganized today, it is because I am. I am not organized at all today. And there's various reasons for it. Yeah, I think you guys are actually closer to the actual fires. We're a bit further away, but yeah, it's just crazy. For sure. It's upright and mobile, sunshine. Upright and mobile. Upright and mobile. Well, I hope everybody else is doing well tonight. It's just, yeah, been a little crazy. October country. This is weird. What? Oh, summer colds are the worst. Well, hello over there in Amsterdam. How we doing? This is irritating the crap out of me. Ah, that's why. Searching in the wrong book. It's always when you gotta look up the right anthology, you know? Alright, so we can close that because that's not where that was. Hydra. Yeah, it's always fun when you decide that you're going to read particular stories and then you kind of go, I don't really feel like reading those tonight. It's been one of those days. It's been one of those days where I just kind of was like, I don't want to read that right now. So I changed it up. So the story, The Haunter and the Haunted, the Haunters and the Haunted that I was going to read tonight, I scrapped it because just decided I didn't want to read it. And I went through a half dozen other stories that I thought about reading and I was going to read and I didn't. Yeah. So I apologize if I seem like I am upside down, because I kind of am, actually. So we'll see. Well, I'm going to be straight up honest with you guys. I almost canceled tonight. I just didn't. I wasn't feeling it, and it's just been one of those days. But I know that, well, I know that normally when I come on, it does help get rid of whatever funk I've got going on. So hopefully that is going to be the case this evening. I have no script written. The stories I picked out that I'm going to read tonight, I picked out about 20 minutes ago. So if everything falls apart, I guess we'll know why. Honestly, Wings, I don't really need anything right now other than the world to just slow the hell down. Between my car getting broken into last weekend and finally getting that taken care of, and then my mother having surgery yesterday and finally making it home from the hospital, and then my best friend who is pregnant went in this morning to be induced, and haven't received an update yet. So I'm worried. I know I shouldn't be worried, but my brain is like that, so I'm worried. I shouldn't be, but I am. And I've also had a couple of things happen that I'm still trying to process that for right now, I'm going to keep to myself. And I'm hoping that I'll just get through tonight, read you guys some stories, calm my own ass down, and we'll go from there. But I also do want to address something before we even get started. I know this is where we meet on this app 4 nights a week. And I'm not married to the numbers, but I do track them. Partly because I'm trying to grow this into something that I can do for a living. I'm just trying to be realistic about it. So tracking the analytics is important. Well, and I'm going to just flat out say it, TikTok's analytics suck. They do. They're awful. They've made changes to them, and they've made it harder to see what's going on. One of the numbers that I look at, obviously there's views, which have been down, and that's not my fault, and it's not the community's fault. It is the algorithm. The algorithm is so wildly inconsistent that it is hard to figure out what to do to help push it along. And one of the stats that I track is distribution. And up until this month, my distribution numbers have been between 80 and 95% from the For You page, which brings new people into the stream. And I do pretty well when, people, hey, from San Diego, how are you, Lita? I do pretty well picking up new followers and bringing new people into the community when they decide to show my live to people. I've done 10 lives so far this month. Only 2 of them have been above average. I do have a spreadsheet that tracks averages. Of the remaining 8 that were below average, 5 of them were below 80%, which with Lita, I am very, very happy that you found us, because with what I'm talking about just now, I'm grateful that you found us. I really am. So when they don't put me out there, when I get, I appreciate you, big girl. I really do. It's very discouraging. It really is when, there's no distribution. They don't show me to new people. They show me to very few people. Hey, from London, how are you? My youngest daughter lives in Liverpool. You might know that. I think you've been here before, lovely. I think you have. Have you? Or no? No, you're new. No, you are new. well, welcome. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate you being here. And it might sound like I'm whining, and I don't mean to be, because I appreciate every single person that comes in here on the regular. You guys are fantastic. I have the most engaged audience community. You guys are amazing. So even on the lowest nights, comments are scrolling, and yes, I knew I'd remember you. And it's so, but when you're trying to grow something into something that you can do for a living, and I don't want to just do this. I want to do actual in-person shows. I want to do, there's so many new ideas that I have. It's crazy. It is crazy. You cannot build a business or a following on numbers that fluctuate so hard. And it's been really discouraging because of the last 10, 5 out of the last 10 lives, so half have been not only below average, but below 80%. And close to, I actually had one that was 68%, which basically means they're not showing me to people. And maybe tonight will be different. I would love that. I would absolutely love for tonight to be different because I love reading to new people. I love sharing these stories with new people as much as I love sharing the stories with my current audience. I love having new people come in here. And it's not necessarily about the money. It's not about the gifts. It's about having a community that's constantly growing and loves listening. Yes, like you read my mind, So I have been struggling because Wednesday night, while, the stories were great, you guys were engaged, distribution was at 70%, which basically means the algorithm just said, no, we're not showing you to anybody. 9 new followers on a Wednesday night is crazy low. I average 50 new followers a night, and on Sundays and Mondays that average has been over 100 to 200 new followers, and the last 2 Mondays and Sundays have been just garbage. But here's the thing that I discovered, and this is on TikTok. This is absolutely on TikTok. What I've discovered is that if you're not selling something, they don't care. They absolutely don't care. And I'll tell you why I found that out. The thing that bothers me is I don't know if you guys have seen the new chest trainers where so this guy was out there. It comes across, when I go on my FYP, and I'm sure you guys have all noticed this, it's damn near every other video is somebody selling something, somebody shilling for the TikTok shop, because we love the TikTok shop, don't we? Say it with me. We love the TikTok shop. Yeah. So this guy's selling these chest trainers, right? He's selling one, and he's got 3 of them. And he says, well, I tried this one, and I tried this one, but this one is the real deal. So I looked at his comments, and somebody said, hey, didn't in your last video say that the other one was the good one? Well, I go to look, and the last 3 videos that the guy posted, he didn't even space them out, were the same 3 arm trainers, but each video he said a different one was the good one, and the other 2 were crap. It's all a scam. And you know what? He's got 10,000 plus views on each one of those videos. I mean, come on, TikTok. Knock it off. And that's why people are not trusting what goes on this app anymore. I don't know that they ever did, but So I'm going to get off my soapbox because that's not what you guys come here for. But I appreciate you guys letting me rant for a little bit. So, like I said, I just picked these stories like 25 minutes ago. And I don't have a script written. And like I said, I almost canceled tonight. yeah. So, that is, I said all that to say this. Not everybody has a TikTok account, but almost everybody I know has one of those accounts that goes over on the tubes of you. So, over the next probably 6 to 7 months, I'm going to be shifting my focus. I will not abandon TikTok. It's not going to happen. But I am going to shift my focus. Because something I've discovered about the tubes, their analytics are better. Their consistency is better. I can predict pretty accurately what's going to happen over there. But I am also going to open up my Discord server very soon, within the next week or so, and we'll go from there. And I know you guys will come with me wherever I go. And I greatly appreciate that, beyond any words. Wednesday, we didn't even break 1,000 views, which is just mind-boggling. Like, the last time I had that happen was almost 8 months ago. I broke 1,000 views on the drop-in live that I did last Saturday, where I was recording. Like, a non-scheduled live, I did better than my regular Wednesday live. It's like, I'm just like, what? Yeah. So, I will be wherever you guys want to find me. Just to let you know. Because I don't want to leave you guys. So I'll still be here. And I'll still be the other place. Yes, absolutely same name on the tubes of you. It is UndeadPapa. I'm pretty much UndeadPapa wherever you find me. And like I said, I'll be opening up my Discord server probably within the next couple weeks. And you guys will be able to find me there all the time. And we'll be doing some fun stuff over there. I was thinking about doing some private story nights, stories that'll get me kicked off of this app. I can read there. So, yeah. So we'll go that route. No. Lulu, so no, I am not leaving. I'm absolutely not leaving. There are too many people on this app that we all take care of each other, whether it's in the voice acting community or in the community here that I've built. But I've come to the conclusion that, building a business on TikTok is not sustainable unless you're going to sell through the TikTok shop. And I don't have anything to sell but my voice. So, and I can't sell that on the TikTok shop. As much as we love the TikTok shop. Yes, I am reading a story tonight. I apologize. I'm just, my brain is all over the place today. But I did happen to pick 2 stories written. I appreciate that, lovely. I do. I did pick out 2 stories tonight that I hope I actually did see that. I want to go see if they've changed it, because it was there. The AI answer there a couple of months ago was actually kind of fun. Let's see. I'm just going to Google UndeadPapa, and I want to see what it comes up with. It says, UndeadPapa, Jeremy Thompson, is a voice artist, writer, audiobook narrator, and digital content creator known for his atmospheric literary performances. He has built a dedicated online community centered around storytelling, poetry readings, and cozy broadcasts. His primary creative highlights include Storytime with UndeadPapa, a regular series featuring live readings and recorded performances of classic literature, sci-fi, horror, and children's books. His catalog includes works by Arthur C. Clarke, Edgar Allan Poe, Stephen King, and Roald Dahl. poetry and monologues. He performs emotionally grounded spoken word pieces and dramatic audiobooks, narrating classic poetry from authors like William Blake alongside his own original written material. Let's see. Social channels. He actively shares his voiceover work across platforms, primarily updating his UndeadPapa TikTok profile, the UndeadPapa Instagram page, and his UndeadPapa Tubes channel. That is kind of cool. Let's see, what about his series, Whispered Legends? Whispered Legends is a dedicated series within UndeadPapa's content catalog where he uses his distinct, low-register voice to narrate mythology, folklore, and ghost stories from around the world. The series leans into a darker campfire-style atmosphere, blending historic legends with a spooky ASMR-inspired audio aesthetic. Okay, all right, that's enough of that. That is very cool, though. I actually really like that. I'm famous. No, you're not. Stop it. All right, so the first story we have for tonight, like I said, I don't have a script written, so we're just going to dive in, and hopefully don't smack our head on the bottom of the pool. First story tonight is written by an author who we've read several times before on Storytime with UndeadPapa, by the name of Henry Kuttner. Henry Kuttner was also one of the authors that was regularly featured on The Twilight Zone. This particular story was originally published in Weird Tales magazine in April of 1939. The story is called Hydra. So, wherever you're listening from, sit back, relax, and get a drink. Because story time is about to begin. Linda, you are just in time. Perfect timing, in fact. Let's see, do my visuals work? Oh, hey, look. That actually worked. Also, if you are coming in from the FYP, let me know. I'm curious to see what the distribution is going to be like tonight. There are sacraments of evil as well as of good about us, and we live and move, to my belief, in an unknown world, a place where there are caves and shadows and dwellers in twilight. It is possible that man may sometimes return on the track of evolution, and it is my belief that an awful lore is not yet dead. Arthur Machen. 2 men died, possibly 3. So much is known. The tabloids ran flaming headlines telling of the mysterious mutilation and death of Kenneth Scott, noted Baltimore author and occultist. And later they capitalized similarly on the disappearance of Robert Ludwig, whose correspondence with Scott was well known in literary circles. The equally strange and even more ghastly death of Paul Edmond, while separated from the scene of the Scott horror, was by the width of a continent, was clearly connected with it. This was known by the presence of a certain much-discussed subject, much-discussed object, which was found clutched in Edmund's rigid hands, and which the credulous claim caused his death. While this solution is improbable, it is nevertheless true that Paul Edmund bled to death because his carotid artery was severed, and it is also true that there are features about the case difficult to explain in the light of present-day science. The tabloids made a great deal of Edmund's diary, and even conventional papers found it difficult to handle that unusual document in a fashion that would not lay them open to the charge of yellow journalism. The Hollywood Citizen News solved the problem for its contemporaries by quoting the least fantastic portions of the diary and hinting plainly that Edmund had been a fiction writer and that the man's notes had never been intended as a truthful summary of events. The privately printed pamphlet on the sending out of the soul, which played so important a part in the diary, seems to be of purely fictional origin. None of the local booksellers has heard of it, and Mr. Russell Hodgkins, California's most noted bibliophile, declares that this title and the volume must have originated in the mind of the ill-fated Paul Edmund. Yet according to Edmund's diary and certain other papers and letters discovered in his desk, it was this pamphlet which caused Ludwig and Edmund to undertake the disastrous experiment. Ludwig had decided to visit his California correspondent, making a leisurely voyage from New York City by way of the Panama Canal. The Carnatic docked on August 15th, and Ludwig spent several hours wandering through San Pedro. It was there, in a musty swap shop, that he bought the pamphlet on the sending out of the soul. When the young man arrived at Edmund's Hollywood apartment, he had the booklet with him. Both Ludwig and Edmund were deeply interested in the occult. They had dabbled in witchcraft and demonology as a result of their acquaintance with Scott, who possessed one of the best occult libraries in America. Scott was a strange man, slender, sharp-eyed, and taciturn. He spent most of his time in the old brownstone house in Baltimore. His knowledge of esoteric matters was little short of phenomenal. He had read the Chaya ritual, and in his letters to Ludwig and Edmund had hinted at the real meanings behind the veiled hints and warnings in the half-legendary manuscript. In his great library were such names as Sinistari, Zancrarius, and the ill-famed Junot de Monsieur. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but hey, we're just going to go with it. And in his library safe he had, it was rumored, an immense scrapbook filled with the excerpts copied from such fantastic sources as the Book of Karnak, the monstrous 60 Stone, and the blasphemous Elder Key, of which only 2 copies are reputed to exist on Earth. Oh, sorry about that. Got to clean my glasses. Like all of a sudden I'm going, I can't see. Again, thank you guys for letting me pop off earlier. I appreciate that. I was not expecting to go that deep into the canyon, but I did. And here we are. It was little wonder, therefore, that the 2 students were anxious to tear aside the veil and view the astounding mysteries of which Scott hinted so cautiously. In his diary, Edmund confessed that his own curiosity was the direct cause of the tragedy. Yet it was Ludwig who brought the booklet and pored over it with Edmund in the latter's apartment. Certainly Edmund described the pamphlet plainly enough, and it is strange, therefore, that no bibliophile could identify it. According to the diary, it was quite small, about 4 by 5 inches, bound in coarse brown paper, and yellowed and crumbling with age. The printing, in 18th century type, was with the long S, was crudely done, and there was neither a date line nor a publisher's imprint. There were 8 pages, 7 of them filled with what Edmund called the usual banal sophisms of mysticism, and on the last page were the specific directions for what would nowadays be known as projecting one's astral. The general process was familiar to both students. Their researches had informed them that the soul, or in modern occult language, astral body, is supposed to be an ethereal double or ghost capable of projection to a distance, but the specific directions, finding these was unusual, nor do they seem difficult to follow. Edmund has purposely been vague about these preparations, but one gathers that the two students visited several chemists before obtaining the ingredients needed, where they secured the cannabis indica, later discovered on the scene of the tragedy, as a mystery, but not, of course, one impossible of solution. Just literally go down to the dispensary down the street. On August 15th, Ludwig, apparently without Edmund's knowledge, wrote Scott by airmail describing the pamphlet and its contents and asking for advice. On the night of August 18th, approximately half an hour after Kenneth Scott received Ludwig's letter, the two young occultists undertook their disastrous experiment. Chapter 2. Later, Edmund blamed himself. In the diary, he mentions Ludwig's uneasiness as though the latter sensed some hidden danger. Ludwig suggested postponing the trial for a few days, but Edmund laughed at his fears. It ended with the two placing the required ingredients in a brazier and kindling the mixture. There were other preparations too, but Edmund was quite vague. He makes one or two furtive references to the 7 lamps and the infracolor, but nothing can be made of these terms. The two had decided to attempt projection of their astral bodies across the continent. They would attempt communication with Kenneth Scott. One can detect a tinge of youthful vanity in this. Cannabis indica formed one of the ingredients of the mixture in the brazier that has been ascertained by analysis. It was the presence of this Indian drug which led so many to believe that later entries in Edmund's diary were evolved from nothing more tangible than the fantasies of an opium or hashish dream, directed along the curious channels they took merely because of the student's preoccupation with those things at the time. Edmund dreamed he saw Scott's house in Baltimore. But it must be remembered that he had been staring at a photograph of that house which he had placed on the table before him, and he was unconsciously willing to go there. He was consciously willing to go there. My apologies. Nothing is more logical, therefore, than that Edmund simply dreamed what he wanted to dream. But Ludwig had the identical vision, or at least so he stated afterward, unless Edmund in that entry lied. It is the opinion of Professor Perry L. Lewis, a recognized expert on dream phenomena, that Edmund, during his hashish vision, spoke of his illusions aloud, with no conscious intention of so doing, nor any later memory of it, and that Ludwig, as in a hypnotic trance, simply saw the phantasms Edmund's words conjured up in his mind. Edmund states in his diary that after watching the burning contents of the brazier for some minutes, he fell into a state of somnolent trance, in which he saw his surroundings clearly, but with certain curious alterations which can only be attributed to the action of the drug. The marijuana smoker may see a tiny hall bedroom metamorphose itself into a huge vaulted chamber. Similarly, Edmund stated that the room in which he sat seemed to enlarge. Oddly, however, the growth was of a strange, abnormal type. The geometry of the room gradually became all wrong. Edmund stresses this point without attempting to explain it. Just when the shifting became noticeable, he does not mention. But presently he found himself in the midst of a chamber which, although recognizably his own, had changed until it centered at a certain point. The notes are almost incoherent here. Edmund obviously found it difficult to describe what he saw in his vision. All the lines and curves of the room, he insists with odd emphasis, seem to point at one specific spot, the brazier where the mixture of drugs and chemicals was smoldering. Very faintly, a persistent ringing came to his ears, but this dwindled and at last died away altogether. At the time, Edmund thought the sound due to the effects of the drug. It was not until later that he learned of Scott's frantic efforts to reach him by means of long-distance telephone. The shrill ringing grew fainter and faded into silence. Edmund was of an experimental turn of mind. He tried to shift his gaze to specific objects he remembered, a vase, a lamp, a table, but the room seemed to possess an indescribable viscid fluidity, so that he found his stare inevitably slipping along warped lines and curves until he was again watching the brazier. It was then that he became conscious of something unusual taking place at that spot. The mixture no longer smoldered. Instead, a strange crystal formation was building itself up within the brazier. This object Edmund found impossible to describe. He could only say that it seemed a continuation of the warped lines of the room, carrying them beyond the point where they centered. Apparently unconscious of the insanity of such a concept, he goes on to say that his eyes began to ache as he watched the crystalline object, but he could not turn away his gaze. The crystal drew him. He felt an abrupt and agonizing suction. There was a high-pitched thrumming in the air, and suddenly he was drifting with increasing velocity toward the thing in the brazier. It sucked him in. Such is Edmund's inexplicable phrase. He felt a moment of incredible cold, and then a new vision rose up before him. Gray fog and instability. Edmund stressed his curious feeling of flux, which he declared existed within himself. He felt, he says oddly, like a cloud of smoke, wavering and drifting aimlessly. But when he glanced down, he saw his own body, fully clothed and apparently quite substantial. Now a dreadful feeling of unease began to oppress his mind. The fog thickened and whirled. The nightmare, causeless fear familiar to the opium-taker clutched him in its grip. Something he felt was approaching, something utterly horrible and frightful in its potent menace. Then, quite suddenly, the fog was gone. Far beneath him he saw what at first he took to be the sea. He was hanging, unsupported in empty air, and a surging grayness shimmered and crawled from horizon to horizon. The fluctuating leaden surface was dotted and speckled with round, dark blobs. These were innumerable. Without conscious volition, he felt himself drawn down vertically, and as he approached the mysterious grayness, he saw it more clearly. He could not determine its nature. It seemed merely a sea of gray slime, protoplasmic and featureless. But the dark blobs became recognizable as heads. Into Edmund's mind flashed the memory of a narrative he had once read, written in the 12th century by the monk Alberico, and purporting to be the record of a descent into hell. Like Dante, Alberico had seen the torments of the damned, the blasphemers, he wrote in his stilted, pedantic Latin, had been immersed to their necks in a lake of molten metal. Edmund remembered Alberico's description now. Then he saw that the heads were not those of beings partly submerged in the gray slime. Instead, they were homogeneous with the grayness. They grew from it. Edmund's fear had left him. With oddly detached curiosity, he scanned the fantastic surface below. There were human heads bobbing and nodding from the gray sea, uncountable thousands of them. But by far the greater number of the heads were not human. Some of these latter bore traces of the anthropoid, but others were scarcely recognizable as living objects. For the heads lived. Their eyes stared with awful agony. Their lips writhed in soundless laments. Tears coursed down the sunken cheeks of many. Even the horribly inhuman heads, bird-like, reptilian, monstrous things of living stone and metal and vegetable matter, showed traces of unceasing torment that gnawed at them. Down toward the ghastly horde Edmund was drawn. Again, blackness enveloped him. It was transitory, but as he emerged from the momentary unconsciousness, he felt, he says, curiously changed. Something had happened to him during that fateful period of darkness. There seemed to be a cloudy vagueness shadowing his mind, so that he viewed his surroundings darkly and through a kind of haze. In this new vision, he seemed to be high in the air above a silent, moonlit city and rapidly moving downward. There was a full moon, and by its light he recognized the old brownstone house toward which he was descending. It was Kenneth Scott's home, made familiar to him by the photograph. A vague thrill of triumph warmed him. The experiment, then, had succeeded. The house loomed up before him. He was hovering outside an open, unlighted window. Peering in, he recognized the slender form of Kenneth Scott seated at a desk. The occultist's lips were tightly compressed, and a worried scowl darkened his face. A great book with yellowed parchment pages was open before the man, who was studying it carefully. Occasionally his worried eyes would turn to the telephone on the desk beside him. Edmund made an attempt to call Scott, and the latter looked up, staring through the window. Instantly, a shocking change transformed Scott's face. The man seemed to become quite insane with fear. He sprang up from the desk, overturning his chair, and simultaneously Edmund felt an impelling urge dragging him forward. What happened after that is confused and hazy. Edmund's notes are fragmentary at this point, and it is only possible to gather that Edmund was in the room and pursuing the frantic Scott in a fashion that was inexplicable and utterly abnormal. He was flowing, and Scott was caught and engulfed. And here, Edmund's notes break off utterly, as though he had been overcome by remembrance of the episode. Merciful blackness swallowed Edmund then. But there was one more flashing vision before the dream faded and was gone. Again he seemed to be outside Scott's window, swiftly retreating into the night, and through the open square of yellow radiance was visible part of Scott's desk and the crumpled body of the man himself lying on the carpet beyond it. At least, Edmund assumed that it was Scott's body. for either the man was lying with his head doubled at an impossible angle out of sight beneath his torso, or else he was headless. That ended the dream. Edmund awoke to find the room in darkness, and Ludwig stirring sleepily nearby. Both students were distracted and overwrought. They argued excitedly for some time with occasional semi-hysterical outbursts, and Ludwig revealed that his vision had been identical with Edmund's. It was a pity that neither of them took the trouble to analyze the situation and look for a logical explanation, but both, of course, were mystics and thoroughly credulous. The telephone rang. An impatient operator asked if Edmund would receive a call from Baltimore. She had, she said, been ringing the apartment for some time without getting a response. Edmund cut her off abruptly and requested that the connection be put through. But this could not be done. The operator at the Baltimore exchange reported that her party did not answer, and after a futile exchange of questions, Edmund hung up. It was then Ludwig confessed to writing Scott, bemoaning the reticence that had made him refrain from telling the Baltimore occultist the purpose of the experiment, the destination to which the astrals were directed. Nor were their fears calmed by the discovery of the object in the brazier. Apparently, part of the vision, at least, had been founded on truth. The unknown chemicals had crystallized into a thing that appeared to be all planes and angles. It was formed of some brittle substance resembling frosted glass, was roughly pyramidal, and measured about 6 inches from apex to base. Ludwig wanted to smash it at once, but Edmund prevented him. Their arguments were brought to an end by the arrival of a telegram from Scott. It read, "Attempt no experiments with pamphlet you mention. Stop tremendously dangerous and may mean my death. Stop. Am writing you today by airmail. Full details. Stop. Advise you burn pamphlet. Kenneth Scott." Chapter 3. There were 2 more communications which resulted in Paul Edmund's temporary stay at a Hollywood hospital. The first was an item which appeared in time for the morning edition of the Los Angeles Times of August 20th. It stated briefly that Kenneth Scott, well-known author and occultist residing in Baltimore, Maryland, had been mysteriously murdered. There were no clues to indicate the identity of the assailant, and the body had not been discovered until the afternoon of the 19th. The fact that the victim's head had been severed from his body and was inexplicably missing made identification at first doubtful. But Scott's physician confirmed the logical supposition. A quantity of grayish slime smeared on the carpet and added another element of the mystery to the ease. Scott's head, the coroner declared, had been cleanly severed from his body by a sharp blade. Police stated that an arrest would be made shortly. Needless to say, that arrest was never made. The tabloids seized the juicy morsel and made much of it, and an enterprising reporter unearthed the fact that Scott had sent an airmail letter from the Baltimore Central Post Office shortly before the time at which his death had been fixed. It was this communication which was the direct cause of Edmund's nervous collapse and his retirement to a hospital. The letter was found in Edmund's apartment, but it sheds little light on the case. Scott was a visionary, and his letter bears an almost suspicious resemblance to his fictional work. "Both of you know," ran part of the long letter, "how much truth there is to be found behind old legends and folklore. The Cyclops is no longer a myth, as any doctor familiar with the monstrous births can tell you. And you know how my theories regarding the elixir vitae have been confirmed by the discovery of heavy water. Well, the myth of the Hydra is based on such a truth. There are innumerable tales of multi-headed monsters, all springing from the actual entity whose real existence a very few have known through the ages. This creature did not originate on Earth, but in the gulfs outside. It was, after a fashion, a vampiric entity, not living not on the blood of its victims, but on their heads, their brains. This may sound strange to you, but you know by this time there are beings outside whose needs and flesh are not as ours. Through the eons, this entity has ravened in the abyss beyond our dimension, sending out its call to claim victims where it could. For this entity, by absorbing the heads and brains of intelligent creatures both of this world and of other planets, emerges with its powers and vitality greatly augmented. You both know that through the ages there have been certain people willing to worship the Great Ones, even the evil aliens who have come down to us in folklore as demons. Every god and every entity has had its worshippers, from Black Pharaoh to the least of the aliens whose powers are more than human. And these cults intermingle in a very curious way, so that we find traces of forgotten worship cropping up in far later times. When the Romans worshipped the Magna Mater in Italy's dark forests, for instance, why do you suppose they incorporated into their ritual the mystic adoration Gorgo Mormo Thousand-Faced Moon? The implication is clear. I have gone into considerable detail, but it has been necessary to prepare you for my explanation of the origin of that pamphlet Robert found in San Pedro. I knew of this booklet, which was printed in Salem in 1783, but I had thought that there were no longer any copies in existence. That pamphlet is a trap, and a most damnable one, created by the worshippers of the Hydra to lure victims into the maw of their god. It purports to be merely an innocent experiment with the astral self. However, the real purpose of the thing is to open a gateway and prepare a sacrifice for the Hydra. When the booklets were first distributed through secret underground channels, there was an epidemic of deaths in New England. Dozens of men and women were found headless with no trace of any human murderer. Yet the real killers were the ones who performed the experiment according to the directions given in the booklet, and unknowingly let the Hydra use their vital forces to materialize on this planet. Baldly speaking, what happens is this: the subject, following the instructions, inhales the fumes of the drug which tears apart the veil between our world and outside. He concentrates upon the person whom he wishes his astral to visit, and that person is doomed. For the experimenter is drawn outside into another dimension of space, and through a certain psychic and chemical process is temporarily made one with the Hydra. What it amounts to is this: The Hydra, using the experimenter's astral as a host, comes to Earth and takes its prey, which is the person upon whom the subject has been concentrating. There is no real danger to the experimenter himself, save perhaps for a possible severe nervous shock. But the other, the victim, is taken by the Hydra for its own. He is doomed to eternal torment, except in certain unusual cases where he can maintain a psychic link with an earthly mind. But I need not speak of that. I am greatly worried. I have put through a long-distance call to Edmund's apartment, and no doubt you will hear from me tonight, long before this letter can arrive. If you are rash enough to undertake the experiment before I can communicate with you, I shall be in grave danger, for you may attempt projection of your astral to Baltimore, to me. After I have posted this letter, and while I am waiting for my telephone call to be put through, I shall do my utmost to find a protective formula, although I do not think one exists. Kenneth Scott. It was this letter which sent Edmund to the hospital for a few days to recover from his nervous condition. Ludwig was apparently of stronger stuff. He stayed, at Edmund's request, in the latter's apartment and indulged in some experimenting of his own. Just what happened in Edmund's apartment during the next few days will never be fully known. Ludwig visited his host daily at the hospital and told him of his experiments, and Edmund noted what he could remember on slips of paper which he subsequently inserted between pages of his diary. One is inclined to believe that the anomalous mixture of drugs in the brazier continued to exert its influence on the minds of the two students. For certainly Ludwig's experiences as recorded by Edmund seemed like a continuation of the original hashish dream. Ludwig had burned the pamphlet, as might be expected. And then, on the night following Edmund's removal to the hospital, the other youth maintained he had heard Scott speaking to him. Edmund did not scoff, for he was vastly credulous. He listened intently while Ludwig declared that the occultist was still alive, although existing in another dimension of space. The Hydra had captured Scott, but the occultist had the power to communicate with Ludwig. It is necessary to keep constantly in mind the fact that neither of these two youths was quite normal after the mental agitation he had undergone. So Ludwig added more and more every day to his tale, and Edmund listened. They spoke furtively in whispers, and Edmund kept careful watch over his notes so that they would not fall into skeptical hands. The whole crux of the matter, Ludwig said, was the strange crystalline object which had formed in the brazier. It was this which kept open the path to outside. One could pass through it if one wished, despite the fact that it was not as large as a man's head, because the crystal created a warp in space, a term Edmund mentions several times but entirely neglects to explain. The Hydra, however, could not return to Earth unless the original conditions were duplicated. Ludwig said he had heard Scott's voice whispering thinly from the crystalline thing of insane planes and angles, and the occultist was in horrible agony and insistent that Ludwig rescue him. It would not be difficult provided the student followed instructions implicitly. There were dangers, but he must have courage, obey, and strive to undo the harm he had done. Only thus could Scott be freed from endless agony and return to Earth. So, Ludwig told Edmund, he went through the crystal, again this vague and extraordinary phrase, taking those things Scott said he would need. Chief among them was a razor-keen, bone-handled carving knife. There were other objects, some of them difficult to obtain, which Ludwig did not specify, or which, if he did, Edmund did not mention in his notes. According to Ludwig's narrative, he went through the crystal, and he found Scott. But not at first. There were nights of fumbling progress through fantastic and terrible visions of nightmare, guided always by the insistent whisper of Scott's voice. There were gates to be passed and strange dimensions to traverse. And so Ludwig moved through awful abysses of pulsing, fearful darkness. He went through a place of curious violet light that sent tinkling evil trills of goblin laughter after him. He went through a cyclopean deserted city of ebon stone, which he shudderingly recognized as fabled Dis. In the end, he found Scott. He did what was necessary. When he came to the hospital the next day, Edmund was shocked by the bloodless pallor of his friend and the little crawling lights of madness that shone in his eyes. The pupils were unnaturally dilated, and Ludwig spoke that day in disjointed whispers which Edmund found hard to follow. The notes suffered. It is only clear that Ludwig declared he had freed Scott from the grip of the Hydra, and that over and over again the youth kept muttering something about the terrible gray slime that had smeared the blade of his carving knife. He said his task was not yet ended. Undoubtedly, it was the drug-poisoned mind of Robert Ludwig speaking when he told how he had left Scott, or at least the living part of him, in a plane of space which was not inimical to human life, and which was not subject to entirely natural laws and processes. Scott wanted to return to Earth. He could return now, Ludwig told Edmund, but the strange vitality that maintained life in what was left of Scott would dissipate immediately on Earth. Only in certain planes and dimensions was it possible for Scott to exist at all, and the alien force that kept him alive was gradually departing now that he was no longer drawing sustenance from the Hydra. Ludwig said that quick action was necessary. There was a certain spot outside where Scott could achieve his desire. In that place, though, was obscurely linked. In that place, thought was obscurely linked to energy and matter because of an insane, shrill piping, Ludwig said, that eternally filtered from beyond a veil of flickering colors. It was very near the center of chaos where dwells Azathoth, the Lord of all things. All that exists was created by the thoughts of Azathoth, and only in the center of ultimate chaos could Scott find means to live again on Earth in human form. There is an erasure in Edmund's notes at this point, and it is only possible to make out the fragment of thought made real. White-faced, hollow-cheeked, Ludwig said that he must complete his task. He must take Scott to the center, although he confessed to a horrible fear that made him hesitate. There were dangers in the way, and pitfalls where one might easily be trapped. Worst of all, the veil shielding Azathoth was thin, and even the slightest glimpse of the Lord of all things would mean utter and complete destruction to the beholder. Scott had spoken of that, Ludwig said, and had also mentioned the dreadful lure that would drag the young student's eyes to the fatal spot unless he fought strongly against it. Biting his lips nervously, Robert Ludwig left the hospital, and we assume met with foul play on his way to Edmund's apartment, for Edmund never saw his friend again on Earth. Chapter 4. The police were still searching for the missing head of Kenneth Scott. Edmund gathered that from the newspapers. He waited impatiently the next day for Ludwig to appear, and after several hours had passed without result, he telephoned his apartment and got no response. Eventually, worried and almost sick with anxiety, he spent a turbulent 10 minutes with his doctor and another with the superintendent. Finally, he achieved his purpose and went by taxi to his apartment, having overruled the objection of hospital officials. Ludwig was gone. He had vanished without a trace. Edmund considered summoning the police, but speedily dismissed the thought. He paced about the apartment nervously, seldom turning his gaze from the crystalline object that still rested in the brazier. His diary gives little clue to what happened that night. One can conjecture that he prepared another dose of the narcotic drug, or that the toxic effects of the fumes Edmund inhaled several days before had finally worked such disintegration within his brain that he could no longer distinguish between the false and the real. An entry in the diary dated the following morning begins abruptly. "I've heard him. Just as Bob said. He spoke through the crystal thing. He's desperate. And tells me that Bob failed. He didn't get Scott to the center, or Scott could have materialized again on Earth and rescued Bob. Something, I'm not sure what, caught Bob. God help him. May God help us all. Scott says I must begin where Bob left off and finish the job. There is a soul laid bare in the last pages of that record, and it is not a pleasant sight. Somehow the most frightful of the unearthly horrors the diary describes seemed not quite as dreadful as the last conflict that took place in that apartment above Hollywood, when a man wrestled with his fear and realized his weakness. It was probably just as well that the pamphlet was destroyed, for such a brain-wrecking drug as was described in it must surely have originated in some hell as terrible as any which Edmund portrays. The last pages of the diary show a mind crumbling into ruin. I went through. Bob has made it easier. I can begin where he left off, as Scott says. And I went up through the cold flame and the whirling vortices until I reached the place where Scott is. Where he was, rather. For I picked him up and carried him through several planes before I had to return. Bob did not mention the suction one has to keep fighting against. but it doesn't get very strong until I've quite a distance in. The next entry is dated a day later. It is scarcely legible. Couldn't stand it. Had to get out. Walked around Griffith Park for hours. Then I came back to the apartment, and almost immediately Scott spoke to me. I am afraid. I think he senses that and is frightened too, and angry. He says we can't waste any more time. His vitality is almost gone, and he's got to reach the center quick and get back to Earth. I saw Bob. Just a glimpse. And I wouldn't have known it was he if Scott hadn't told me. He was all awry and horrible somehow. Scott said the atoms of his body had adapted themselves to another dimension when he let himself get caught. I've got to be careful. We're nearly at the center. The last entry. Once more we'll do it. God, I'm afraid. Horribly afraid. I heard the piping. It turned my brain into ice. Scott was shouting at me, urging me on, and I think trying to drown that other sound. But of course he couldn't do it. There was a faint, violet glow in the distance and a flickering of colored lights. Beyond, Scott told me, was Azathoth's. I can't do it. I don't dare. Not with that piping and those shapes I saw moving far down. If I look in that direction when I'm at the veil, it will mean. But Scott is insanely angry with me. He says I was the cause of it all. I had an almost uncontrollable impulse to let the suction draw me back, and then to smash the gateway, the crystal thing. Maybe if I find myself unable to keep looking away from the veil when next I go through, I'll do just that. I told Scott if he let me come back to Earth for one more breathing space, I'd finish the job this next time. He agreed, but said to hurry. His vitality is going fast. He said if I don't come through the gateway in 10 minutes, he'd come after me. He won't, though. The life that keeps him going outside wouldn't be any use on the Earth, except for a second or two. My 10 minutes is up. Scott is calling from the gateway. I'm not going. I can't face it. Not the last horror outside, with those things moving behind the veil and that awful piping, screaming out. I won't go, I tell you. No, Scott, I can't face it. You can't come out like that. You die. I tell you, I won't go. You can't force me. I'll smash the gateway first. What? No, you can't. You can't do it, Scott. Don't. God, he's coming out. That was the last entry in the diary, which police found open on Edmund's desk. A hideous screaming and subsequently a stream of red liquid seeping out sluggishly from beneath the door of Edmund's apartment had resulted in the arrival of 2 radio patrol officers. The body of Paul Edmund was found near the door, the head and shoulders lying in a widening crimson pool. Nearby was an overturned brass brazier and a flaky white substance, granular in nature, and it was scattered over the carpet. Edmund's stiff fingers still tightly grip the object which has been the cause of so much discussion. This object was in an incredible state of preservation in view of its nature. Part of it was coated with a peculiar grayish slime, and its jaws were clamped tightly, the teeth having horribly mangled Edmund's throat and severed the carotid artery. There was no need to search further for the missing head of Kenneth Scott. Well, that was fun. I do enjoy stories that have characters that have unhinged moments. Because I'll be honest, those are really fun to voice. So what did you guys think? Did we enjoy it? Did we not enjoy it? Should I quit while I'm ahead? Or while I still have one? It was very crazy. But I mean, Henry Kuttner is just a genius. Extremely underrated. What is it that I'm drinking? It is nothing psychedelic or of that nature. It is just simply a Monster energy drink. The flavor is Punk Punch. It's very good. Came in late. When did you start? I don't know. When did I start? I got off on a little bit of a rant. So I probably started maybe 20 after 9, around there. So, but very bad. Very, very bad. Very, very, very bad. Why very bad? What is very bad? Very bad for me? Not healthy? I fully admit that. But I don't drink coffee, so it's really all I've got. I couldn't get my normal Ghost energy drink, but you know, hey. The Ghost has got a new flavor out that's 7-Up, and it's so good. 74-year-old kid. Oh, you know, hey. Yeah, I appreciate that, Beeford, and I appreciate you hanging out, even though Sunday is your favorite. I truly do. I truly do. I am honestly not sure what I'm reading this Sunday. I have a couple of ideas, but I would like to do the picture book night that I have been talking about, not this coming Sunday, but the following. So we'll see. So, I do have one more story for tonight. I generally don't drink more than one in a day, and honestly, the 200 milligrams of caffeine is plenty for me. I don't usually drink more than one. Sometimes I'll have 2 if I have a particularly rough morning, but you know. So I was on. I started the live at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. I got off on a little bit of a rant, complaining about a particular app upon which we are speaking, and then I started reading, because that's why you guys are here, to listen to me read and not listen to me complain. So it's been a rough week. It's been a rough day. And I'm here. I almost didn't. I almost said to hell with it. I wasn't going to do the live tonight, but I decided to do it anyway because, yes. Yeah, my lives go from 9 p.m. Eastern Standard to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard, so whatever that translates to. Let me see. Did I get any? Nope. Still waiting to hear back from my bestie about whether or not she's had the baby. So, still getting a little nervous, but hoping for the best. All right. So, we are going to do one more story tonight, if you guys are up for it. It is a story by one of our more popular authors that I've done many, many stories of. It is called The Skeleton by Ray Bradbury. Yeah, I'm hoping. I know she's going to be pretty tired, so we'll see. We'll see. Well, I will say I generally drink water. The only reason I drink these is because I don't want to fall asleep on my lives, and I don't drink coffee. So, yeah. But I do appreciate your concern. I do. I absolutely do. So the story is Skeleton by Ray Bradbury. And let's just dive right in, because like I said, I have no script tonight. Celsius is okay. It's a little too wings. Relax. I'm getting there. Rush me. Anyway, no, it's okay. You can rush me all you want. I'm just happy that you're all here to rush me. Yeah. Though I do, there's a couple of C4 flavors that I like too. There's one that's a Hawaiian one that's got a bit of a pineapple zing to it. It's pretty good. Anyway, this next story is called Skeleton by Ray Bradbury. It was past time for him to see the doctor again. Mr. Harris turned palely in at the stairwell, and on his way up the flight he saw Dr. Burleigh's name gilded over a pointing arrow. Would Dr. Burleigh sigh when he walked in? After all, this would make the 10th trip so far this year. But Burleigh shouldn't complain. He was paid for the examinations. The nurse looked Mr. Harris over and smiled, a bit amusedly, as she tiptoed to the glazed glass door, opened it, and put her head in. Harris thought he heard her say, "Guess who's here, doctor?" And didn't the doctor's voice reply faintly, "Oh, my God. Again?" Harris swallowed uneasily. When Harris walked in, Dr. Burleigh snorted. "Aches in your bones again, huh?" He scowled and adjusted his glasses. "My dear Harris, you've been curried with the finest tooth combs and bacteria brushes known to science. You are just nervous. Let's see your fingers. Too many cigarettes? Let's smell your breath. Too much protein? Let's see your eyes. Not enough sleep. My response, go to bed. Stop the protein. No smoking. $10, please." Harris stood, sulking. The doctor glanced up from his papers. "You still here? You're a hypochondriac. That's $11 now." "But why should my bones ache?" asked Harris. Dr. Burleigh spoke as to a child. "You ever had a sore muscle and kept irritating it, fussing with it, rubbing it? It gets worse the more you bother it. Then you leave it alone and the pain vanishes. You realize you caused most of the soreness yourself. Well, son, that's what's with you. Leave yourself alone. Take a dose of salts, get out of here, and take a trip to Phoenix. Take the trip to Phoenix that you've stewed about for months. Do you good to travel. 5 minutes later, Mr. Harris rifled through a classified phone directory at the corner druggist's. A fine lot of sympathy one got from blind fools like Burleigh. He pressed his finger down a list of bone specialists, found one named M. Munigent. Munigent lacked an M.D. or any other academic lettering behind his name, but his office was conveniently near, 3 blocks down, 1 block over. M. Munigent, like his office, was small and dark. Like his office, he smelled of iodoform, iodine, and other odd things. He was a good listener, though, and listened with eager, shiny moves of his eyes when he talked to Harris. His accent was such that he softly whistled each word, undoubtedly because of imperfect dentures. Harris told all. M. Munigent nodded. He had seen cases like this before, the bones of the body. Man was not aware of his bones. Ah, yes, the bones. The skeleton, most difficult, something concerning an imbalance, an unsympathetic coordination between soul, flesh, and skeleton. Very complicated, voiced swiftly M. Munigent. Harris listened, fascinated. Now here was a doctor who understood his illness. Psychological, said M. Munigent. He moved swiftly, delicately to a dingy wall and slashed down 6 X-rays to haunt the room with their look of things found floating in an ancient tide. Here! The skeleton, surprised. Here, luminous portraits of the long, the short, the large, the small bones. Mr. Harris must be aware of his position, his problem. M. Munigent's hand tapped, rattled, whispered, scratched at faint nebulae of flesh in which hung ghosts of cranium, spinal cord, pelvis, lime, calcium, marrow, here, there, this, that, these, those, and others. Look! Harris shuddered. The X-rays and the paintings blew in a green and phosphorescent wind from a land peopled by the monsters of Dale and Fuseli. M. Munigent whistled quietly. Did Mr. Harris wish his bones treated? That depends, said Harris. Well, M. Munigent could not help Harris unless Harris was in the proper mood. Psychologically, one had to need help, or the doctor was useless. But, shrugging, M. Munigent would try. Harris lay on a table with his mouth open. The lights were switched off, the shades drawn. M. Munigent approached his patient. Something touched Harris's tongue. He felt his jawbones forced out. They creaked and made faint cracking noises. One of those skeleton charts on the dim wall seemed to quiver and jump. A violent shudder seized Harris involuntarily. His mouth snapped shut. M. Munigent shouted. His nose had almost been bitten off. No use, no use. Now was not the time. M. Munigent whispered the shades up, dreadfully disappointed. When Mr. Harris felt he could cooperate psychologically, when Mr. Harris really needed help and trusted M. Munigent to help him, then maybe something could be done. M. Munigent held out his little hand. In the meantime, the fee was only $2. Mr. Harris must begin to think. Here was a sketch for Mr. Harris to take home and study. It would acquaint him with his body. He must be tremblingly aware of himself. He must be on guard. Skeletons were strange, unwieldy things. M. Munigent's eyes glittered. Good day to Mr. Harris. Oh, and would he care for a breadstick? M. Munigent proffered a jar for a long, hard, salty breadstick to Harris, taking one himself, saying that chewing breadsticks kept him in practice. Good day to Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris went home. The Jim Jams. I'm pretty sure this one's going to give you the Jim Jams too. The next day, Sunday, Mr. Harris discovered innumerable fresh aches and pains in his body. He spent the morning, his eyes fixed, staring with new interest at the small, anatomically perfect painting of a skeleton M. Munigent had given him. His wife, Clarice, startled him at dinner when she cracked her exquisitely thin knuckles one by one until he clapped his hands to his ears and cried, "Stop!" The rest of the afternoon he quarantined himself in his room. Clarice played bridge in the parlor, laughing and chatting with 3 other ladies, while Harris, hidden away, fingered and weighed the limbs of his body with growing curiosity. After an hour, he suddenly rose and called, "Clarice!" She had a way of dancing into any room, her body doing all sorts of soft, agreeable things to keep her feet from ever quite touching the nap of a rug. She excused herself from her friends and came to see him now brightly. She found him reseated in a far corner. She saw that he was staring at the anatomical sketch. "Are you still brooding, sweet?" she asked. "Please don't." She sat upon his knees. Her beauty could not distract him now in his absorption. He juggled her lightness. He touched her kneecap suspiciously. It seemed to move under her pale, glowing skin. "Is it supposed to do that?" he asked, sucking in his breath. "Is what supposed to do what?" she laughed. "You mean my kneecap. Is it supposed to run around on top of your knee that way?" She experimented. "So it does," she marveled. "I'm glad yours slithers too," he sighed. "I was beginning to worry." "About what?" He patted his ribs. "My ribs don't go all the way down. They stop here, and I found some confounded ones that dangle in midair." Beneath the curve of her small breast, Clarice clasped her hands. "Of course, silly. Everybody's ribs stop at a given point, and those funny short ones are floating ribs." "I hope they don't float around too much." The joke was almost uneasy. Now, above all, he wished to be alone. Further discoveries, newer and stranger archaeological diggings lay within reach of his trembling hands, and he did not wish to be laughed at. "Thanks for coming in, dear," he said. "Any time." She rubbed her small nose softly against his. "Wait, here, now." He put his finger to touch his nose and hers. "Did you realize that nose bone grows down only this far? From there on, a lot of gristly tissue fills out the rest." She wrinkled hers. "Of course, darling." And she danced from the room. Now, sitting alone, he felt the perspiration rise from the pools and hollows of his face to flow in a thin tide down his cheeks. He licked his lips and shut his eyes. Now, next on the agenda, what? The spinal cord. Yes. Here. Slowly he examined it in the same way he operated the many push-buttons in his office, thrusting them to summon secretaries, messengers. But now, in these pushings of his spinal column, fears and terrors answered, rushed from a million doors in his mind to confront and shake him. His spine felt horribly unfamiliar, like the little shards of a fish freshly eaten, its bones left strewn in a cold china platter. He seized the little rounded nobbins. Lord! Lord! His teeth began to chatter. God Almighty, he thought. Why haven't I realized it all these years? All of these years I've gone around with a skeleton inside me. How is it that we take ourselves for granted? How is it we never question our bodies and our being? A skeleton. One of those jointed, snowy, hard things. One of those foul, dry, brittle, gouge-eyed, skull-faced, shake-fingered, rattling things that sway from neck chains in abandoned webbed closets. One of those things found on the desert all along and scattered like dice. He stood upright, because he could not bear to remain seated. Inside me now, he grasped his stomach, his head. Inside my head is a skull, one of those curved carapaces which holds my brain like an electrical jelly, one of those cracked shells with the holes in the front like two holes shot through it by a double-barreled shotgun, with its grottos and caverns of bone, its revetments and placements for my flesh, my smelling, my seeing, my hearing, my thinking. A skull encompassing my brain, allowing it to exit through its brittle windows to see the outside world. He wanted to dash into the bridge party, upset it, a fox in a chicken yard, the cards fluttering all around like chicken feathers burst upwards in clouds. He stopped himself, only with a violent, trembling effort. Now, man, control yourself. This is a revelation. Take it for what it's worth. Understand it. Savor it. But a skeleton, screamed his subconscious. I won't stand for it. It's vulgar, it's terrible, it's frightening. Skeletons are horrors. They clink and tinkle and rattle in old castles hung from oaken beams, making long, indolently rustling pendulums in the wind. Darling, will you come meet the ladies? His wife's clear, sweet voice called from far away. Mr. Harris stood. His skeleton held him up. This thing inside, this invader, this horror was supporting him. Arms, legs, and head. It was like feeling someone else just behind you who shouldn't be there. With every step, he realized how dependent he was on this other thing. Darling, I'll be with you in a moment, he called weakly. To himself, he said, Come on, brace up. You've got to go back to work tomorrow. Friday, you must make that trip to Phoenix. It's a long drive, hundreds of miles. Must be in shape for that trip, or you won't get Mr. Kreldon to invest in your ceramics business. Chin up now. A moment later, he stood among the ladies, being introduced to Mrs. Withers, Mrs. Abelamat, and Mrs. Kirthy, all of whom had skeletons inside them, but took it very calmly because nature had carefully clothed the bare nudity of clavicle, tibia, and femur with breasts, thighs, calves, and coiffure and eyebrows satanic with bee-stung lips. And Lord, shouted Mr. Harris inwardly, when they talk or eat, part of their skeleton shows their teeth. I never thought of that. Excuse me, he gasped, and ran from the room only in time to drop his lunch among the petunias over the garden balustrade. Somebody is losing his mind. That night, seated on the bed as his wife undressed, he pared his toenails and fingernails scrupulously. These parts, too, were where his skeleton was shoving, indignantly growing out. He must have muttered part of this theory because the next thing he knew, his wife in negligee was on the bed, her arms around his neck, yawning. "Oh, my darling, fingernails are not bone. They're only hardened epidermis." He threw the scissors down. "Are you certain?" "I hope so. I'd feel better." He looked at the curve of her body, marveling. "I hope all people are made the same way." "If you aren't the darndest hypochondriac." She held him at arm's length. "Come on, what's wrong? Tell Mama." "Something inside me," he said. "Something I ate." The next morning and all afternoon at his downtown office, Mr. Harris sorted out the sizes, shapes, and construction of various bones in his body with displeasure. At 10 a.m. he asked to feel Mr. Smith's elbow one moment. Mr. Smith obliged, but scowled suspiciously, and after lunch Mr. Harris asked to touch Miss Laurel's shoulder blade, and she immediately pushed herself back against him, purring like a kitten and shutting her eyes. "Miss Laurel," he snapped, "stop that!" Alone, he pondered his neuroses. The war was just over. The pressure of his work, the uncertainty of the future probably had much to do with his mental outlook. He wanted to leave the office, get into business for himself. He had more than a little talent for ceramics and sculpture. As soon as possible, he'd head for Arizona, borrow that money from Mr. Creldon, build a kiln, and set up shop. Was a worry. What a case he was. But luckily he had contacted M. Munigent, who seemed eager to understand and help him. He would fight it out with himself, not go back to either Munigent or Dr. Burleigh unless he was forced to. The alien feeling would pass. He just sat, staring into space. The alien feeling did not pass. It grew. On Tuesday and Wednesday, it bothered him terrifically that his epidermis, hair, and other appendages were of a high disorder, while his integumented skeleton of himself was a slick, clean structure of efficient organization. Sometimes, in certain lights, with his lips drawn morosely down, weighted with melancholy, he imagined he saw his skull grinning at him behind the flesh. "Let go!" he cried. "Let go of me! My lungs! Stop it!" He gasped convulsively as if his ribs were crushing the breath from him. "My brain! Stop squeezing it!" And terrifying headaches burnt his brain to a blind cinder. "My insides, let them be, for God's sake! Stay away from my heart!" His heart cringed from the fanning motion of ribs like pale spiders crouched and fiddling with their prey. Drenched with sweat, he lay upon the bed one night while Clarice was out attending a Red Cross meeting. He tried to gather his wits, but only grew more aware of the conflict within his dirty exterior and this beautiful, cool, clean, calciumed thing inside. His complexion, wasn't it oily and lined with worry? Observe the flawless, snow-white perfection of the skull. His nose, wasn't it too large? Then observe the tiny bones of the skull's nose before that monstrous nasal cartilage begins forming the lopsided proboscis. His body, wasn't it plump? Well, consider the skeleton. Slender, svelte, economical of line and contour, exquisitely carved oriental ivory. perfect, thin as a white praying mantis. His eyes, weren't they protuberant, ordinary, numb-looking? Be so kind as to note the eye sockets of the skull, so deep and rounded, somber, quiet pools, all-knowing, eternal. Gaze deep, and you never touch the bottom of their dark understanding. All irony, all life, all everything is there in the cupped darkness. Compare, compare, compare! He raged for hours. And the skeleton, ever the frail and solemn philosopher, hung quietly inside, not saying a word, suspended like a delicate insect within a chrysalis, waiting and waiting. Harris sat up slowly. "Wait a minute! Hold on!" he exclaimed. "You're helpless, too. I've got you, too. I can make you do anything I want. You can't prevent it. I say, move your carpals and metacarpals and flanges, and swit up they go as I wave to someone." He laughed. "In order the fibula and femur to locomote, and hun, 2, 3, 4, hun, 2, 3, 4, we walk around the block. There!" Harris grinned. "It's a 50-50 fight. Even Steven. And we'll fight it out, we two. After all, I'm the part that thinks. Yes, by God, yes. Even if I didn't have you, I could still think." Instantly, a tiger's jaw snapped shut, chewing his brain in half. Harris screamed. The bones of his skull grabbed hold and gave him nightmares, then slowly, while he shrieked, nuzzled and ate the nightmares one by one until the last one was gone and the light went out. At the end of the week, he postponed the Phoenix trip because of his health. Weighing himself on a penny scale, he saw the slow, gliding red arrow point to 165. He groaned. "Why, I've weighed 175 for years. I can't have lost 10 pounds. He examined his cheeks in the fly-dotted mirror. Cold, primitive fear rushed over him in odd little shivers. You, I know what you're about, you." He shook his fist at his bony face, particularly addressing his remarks to his superior maxillary, his inferior maxillary, to his cranium, to his cervical vertebrae. "You damned thing, you. You think you can starve me, make me lose weight, eh? Peel the flesh off, leave nothing but the skin on bone, trying to ditch me so you can be supreme, huh? No, no." He fled into a cafeteria. Turkey, dressing, creamed potatoes, 4 vegetables, 3 desserts. He could eat none of it. He was sick to his stomach. He forced himself. His teeth began to ache. "Bad teeth, is it?" he thought angrily. "I'll eat in spite of every tooth clanging and banging and rattling so they fall in my gravy." His head blazed. His breath jerked in and out of a constricted chest. His teeth raged with pain. He knew one small victory. He was about to drink milk when he stopped and poured it into a vase of nasturtiums. "No calcium from you, my boy, no calcium for you. Never again shall I eat foods with calcium or other bone-fortifying minerals. I'll eat for one of us, not both, my lad." 150 pounds, he said, the following week to his wife. "Do you see how I've changed?" "For the better," said Clarice. "You were always a little plump for your height, darling." She stroked his chin. "I like your face. It's so much nicer. The lines of it are so firm and strong now." They're not my lines. They're his, damn him. You mean to say you like him better than you like me? Him? Who's him? In the parlor mirror beyond Clarice, his skull smiled back at him behind his fleshy grimace of hatred and despair. Fuming, he popped malt tablets into his mouth. This was one way of gaining weight when you couldn't keep other foods down. Clarice noticed the malt pellets. "But, darling, you really don't have to regain the weight from me," she said. "Oh, shut up," he felt like saying. She made him lie with his head in her lap. "Darling," she said, "I've watched you lately. You're so badly off. You don't say anything, but you look hunted. You toss in bed at night. Maybe you should go to a psychiatrist. But I think I can tell you everything he would say. I've put it all together from hints you've let escape you. I can tell you that you and your skeleton are one and the same. One nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. United you stand, divided you fall. If you two fellows can't get along like an old married couple in the future, go back and see Dr. Burleigh. But first, relax. You're in a vicious cycle. The more you worry, the more your bones stick out. The more you worry. After all, who picked this fight? You or that anonymous entity you claim is lurking around behind your alimentary canal?" He closed his eyes. "I did. I guess I did." "Go on, Clarice. Keep talking." "You rest now," she said softly. "Rest and forget." Mr. Harris felt buoyed up for half a day. Then he began to sag. It was all very well to blame his imagination, but this particular skeleton, by God, was fighting back. Harris set out for M. Munigent's office late in the day. Walking for half an hour until he found the address, he caught sight of the name M. Munigent initialed in ancient flaking gold on a glass plate outside the building. Then his bones seemed to explode from their moorings. Blasted and erupted with pain, blinded, he staggered away. When he opened his eyes again, he had rounded a corner. M. Munigent's office was out of sight. The pains ceased. M. Munigent was the man to help him. If the sight of his name could cause so titanic a reaction, of course, M. Munigent must be just the man. But not today. Each time he tried to return to that office, the terrible pains took hold. Perspiring, he had to give up and swayed into a cocktail bar. Moving across the dim lounge, he wondered briefly if a lot of blame couldn't be put on M. Munigent's shoulders. After all, it was Munigent who first drawn specific attention to his skeleton and let the psychological impact of it slam home. Could M. Munigent be using him for some nefarious purpose? But what purpose? Silly to suspect him, just a little doctor, trying to be helpful, Munigent and his jar of breadsticks. Ridiculous. M. Munigent was okay. Okay. There was a sight within the cocktail lounge to give him hope. A large, fat man, round as a butterball, stood drinking consecutive beers at the bar. Now there was a successful man. Harris repressed a desire to go up, clap the fat man's shoulder, and inquire as to how he'd gone about impounding his bones. Yes, the fat man's skeleton was luxuriously closeted. There were pillows of fat here, resilient bulges of it there, with several round chandeliers of fat under his chin. The poor skeleton was lost. He could never fight clear of that blubber. It might have tried once, but for now, overwhelmed, not a bony echo of the fat man's supporter remained. Not without envy, Harris approached the fat man as one might cut across the bow of an ocean liner. Harris ordered a drink, drank it, and then dared to address the fat man. "Glands?" "You talking to me?" asked the fat man. "Or is there a special diet?" wondered Harris. "I beg your pardon, but as you see, I'm down. Can't seem to put on any weight. I'd like a stomach like that one of yours. Did you grow it because you were afraid of something?" "You," announced the fat man, "are drunk. But I like drunkards." He ordered more drinks. "Listen close. I'll tell you. Layer by layer," said the fat man. 20 years, man and boy, I built this." He held his vast stomach like a globe of the world, teaching his audience its gastronomical geography. It was no overnight circus. The tent was not raised before dawn on the wonders installed within. I have cultivated my inner organs as if they were thoroughbred dogs, cats, and other animals. My stomach is a fat, pink Persian Tom slumbering, rousing at intervals to purr, mew, growl, and cry for chocolate tidbits. I feed it well. It will most sit up for me, and my dear fellow, my intestines are the rarest purebred Indian anacondas you ever viewed, in the sleekest, coiled, fine, and ruddy health. Keep 'em in prime. I do, all my pets, for fear of something? Perhaps. This called for another drink for everyone. Gain weight? The fat man savored the words on his tongue. Here's what you do. Get yourself a quarreling bird of a wife, a baker's dozen of relatives who can flush a covey of troubles out from behind the veriest molehill. Add to these a sprinkling of business associates whose prime motivation is snatching your last lonely quid. And you are well on your way to getting fat. How so? In no time, you'll begin to subconsciously building fat betwixt yourself and them. A buffer epidermal state. A cellular wall. You'll soon find that eating is the only fun on earth. But one needs to be bothered by outside sources. Too many people in this world haven't enough to worry about. Then they begin picking on themselves and they lose weight. Meet all of the vile, terrible people you can possibly meet, and pretty soon you'll be adding the good old fat. And with that advice, the fat man launched himself out into the dark tide of night, swaying mightily and wheezing. "That's exactly what Dr. Burleigh told me slightly changed," said Harris thoughtfully. "Perhaps that trip to Phoenix now, at this time..." The trip from Los Angeles to Phoenix was a sweltering one, crossing, as it did, the Mojave Desert on a broiling yellow day. Traffic was thin and inconstant, and for long stretches there would not be a car on the road for miles ahead or behind. Harris twitched his fingers on the steering wheel. Whether or not Creldon in Phoenix lent him the money he needed to start his business, it was still a good thing to get away, to put distance behind. The car moved in the hot sluice of desert wind. The one Mr. H sat inside, the other Mr. H, perhaps both perspired. Perhaps both were miserable. On a curve, the inside Mr. H suddenly constricted the outer flesh, causing him to jerk forward on the hot steering wheel. The car plunged off the road into boiling sand and turned half over. Night came. A wind rose. The road was lonely and silent. The few cars that passed went swiftly on their way, their view obstructed. Mr. Harris lay unconscious until very late. He heard a wind rising out of the desert, felt the sting of little sand needles on his cheeks, and opened his eyes. Morning found him gritty-eyed and wandering in thoughtless, senseless circles, having in his delirium got away from the road. At noon he sprawled on the poor shade of a bush. The sun struck him with a keen sword edge, cutting through to his bones. A vulture circled. Harris' parched lips cracked open. "So that's it," he whispered, red-eyed, bristle-cheeked. "One way or another, you'll walk me, starve me, thirst me, kill me." He swallowed dry burrs of dust. "Sun, cook off my flesh so you can peek out. Vultures lunch off me, and there you'll lie, grinning with victory like a bleached xylophone strewn and played by vultures with an ear for odd music. You'd like that. Freedom." He walked on through a landscape that shivered and bubbled in the direct pour of sunlight. Stumbling, falling flat, lying to feed himself little mouths of fire, the air was blue alcohol flame, and vultures roasted and steamed and glittered as they flew in glides and circles. Phoenix, the road, car, water, safety. "Hey!" someone called from way off in the blue alcohol flame. Mr. Harris propped himself up. "Hey!" The call was repeated. A crunching of footsteps, quick. With a cry of unbelievable relief, Harris rose only to collapse again into the arms of someone in a uniform with a badge. The car tediously hauled, repaired, Phoenix reached. Harris found himself in such an unholy state of mind that the business transaction was a numb pantomime. Even when he got the loan and held the money in his hand, it meant nothing. This thing within him, like a hard white sword in a scabbard, tainted his business. His eating colored his love for Clarice, made it unsafe to trust an automobile. All in all, this thing had to be put in its place. The desert incident had brushed too close, too near the bone, one might say, with an ironic twist of one's mouth. Harris heard himself thanking Mr. Creldon dimly for the money. Then he turned his car and motored back across the long miles, this time cutting across to San Diego, so he would miss that desert stretch between El Centro and Beaumont. He drove north along the coast. He didn't trust that desert, but careful. Salt waves boomed, hissing on the beach outside Laguna. Sand, fish, and crustacea would cleanse his bones as swiftly as vultures, slow down on the curves over the surf. Damn, he was sick. Where to turn? Clarice? Burley? Munigent? Bone specialist? Munigent? Well? Darling! Clarice kissed him. He winced at the solidness of the teeth and jaw behind the passionate exchange. Darling, he said, slowly wiping his lips with his wrist, trembling. You look thinner. Oh, darling, the business deal? It went through, I guess. Yes, it did. She kissed him again. They ate a slow, falsely cheerful dinner with Clarice laughing and encouraging him. He studied the phone. Several times he picked it up indecisively, then laid it down. His wife walked in, putting on her coat and hat. Well, sorry, but I have to leave. She pinched him on the cheek. Come on now, cheer up. I'll be back from Red Cross in 3 hours. You lie around and snooze. I simply have to go. When Clarice was gone, Harris dialed the phone nervously. Munigent. The explosions and the sickness in his body after he set the phone down were unbelievable. His bones were racked with every kind of pain, cold and hot, he had ever thought of or experienced in wildest nightmare. He swallowed all the aspirin he could find in an effort to stave off the assault, but when the doorbell finally rang an hour later, he could not move. He lay weak and exhausted, panting, tears streaming down his cheeks. Come in, for God's sake. Munigent came in. Thank God the door was unlocked. Munigent came in. Oh, but Mr. Harris looked terrible. Munigent stood in the center of the living room, small and dark. Harris nodded. The pains rushed through him, hitting him with large iron hammers and hooks. Munigent's eyes glittered as he saw Harris's protuberant bones. He saw that Mr. Harris was now psychologically prepared for aid. Was it not so? Harris nodded again, feebly, sobbing. Munigent still whistled when he talked, something about his tongue and the whistling. No matter. Through his shimmering eyes, Harris seemed to see Munigent shrink, get smaller. Imagination, of course. Harris sobbed out his story of the Phoenix trip. Munigent sympathized. His skeleton was a traitor. They would fix him for once and for all. Mr. Munigent, sighed Harris faintly. I never noticed before. Your tongue, round, tube-like, hollow. My eyes delirious. What do I do? Munigent whistled softly, appreciatively, coming closer. If Mr. Harris would relax in his chair and open his mouth. The lights were switched off. Munigent peered into Harris's dropped jaw. Wider, please. It had been so hard the first visit to help Harris with both body and bone in revolt. Now he had cooperation from the flesh of the man anyway, even if the skeleton protested. In the darkness, Munigent's voice got small, tiny. The whistling became high and shrill. Now, relax, Mr. Harris, now. Harris felt his jaw pressed violently in all directions, his tongue depressed as with a spoon, his throat clogged. He gasped for breath. Whistle. He couldn't breathe. Something squirmed, corkscrewed his cheeks out, bursting his jaws like a hot water douche. Something squirted into his sinuses. His ears clanged. "Ah!" shrieked Harris, gagging. His head, its carapaces riven, shattered, hung loose. Agony shot through his lungs. Lights flickered in his senseless eyeballs. He felt his limbs swiftly cast loose and free. Through streaming eyes, he saw the parlor. The room was empty. Munigent. In God's name, where are you, Munigent? Come help me. Munigent was gone. Help! Then he heard it. Deep down in the subterranean fissures of his body, the minute, unbelievable noises, little smackings and twistings and little dry chippings and grindings and nuzzling sounds, like a tiny, hungry mouse down in the red-blooded dimness, gnawing ever so earnestly and expertly at what might have been but was not a submerged timber. Clarice, walking along the sidewalk, held her head high and marched straight toward her house on St. James Place. She was thinking of the Red Cross as she turned the corner and almost ran into this little dark man who smelled of iodine. Clarice would have ignored him if it were not for the fact that as she passed, he took something long, white, and oddly familiar from his coat and proceeded to chew on it as on a peppermint stick. Its end devoured his extraordinary tongue, darted within the white confection, sucking out the filling, making contented noises. He was still crunching his goody as she proceeded up the sidewalk to her house, turned the doorknob, and walked in. "Darling," she called, smiling around. "Darling, where are you?" She shut the door, walked down the hall into the living room. "Darling!" She stared at the floor for 20 seconds, trying to understand. She screamed. Outside, in the sycamore darkness, the little man pierced a long white stick with intermittent holes. Then, softly sighing, his lips puckered, played a sad little tune upon the improvised instrument to accompany the shrill and awful singing of Clarice's voice as she stood in the living room. Many times as a little girl, Clarice had run on the beach sands, stepped on a jellyfish, and screamed. It was not so bad finding an intact, gelatin-skinned jellyfish in one's living room. One could step back from it. It was when the jellyfish called you by name. Oh, that was a good one. God, I love Ray Bradbury. That man has such a twisted imagination. Holy crow. I love it. I love it. And the best part is he just, it's like with the last story, just it's the inner monologue of Mr. Harris is so downward spirally into madness. It is so much fun to voice it, and just because you can just really chew on it like a bone. Yeah. Oh gosh, goodness, I am a little nuts tonight. Just a tiny bit nuts. It's been a long day. Well, gosh, wow, it's 11:20. an article came up. I'm so glad you guys enjoyed it. Yeah. I needed tonight. I really did. And I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me and letting me rant a little bit at the beginning. And, yeah. But I really appreciate it. Hearing a quote from it at the same time. Nice. I like it. That's good. They're listening to us. They know what we're thinking. Anyway. Well, I really appreciate you guys being here with me tonight. And, just kind of treading through this Saturday. It's not even, oh my God, I don't even know what day it is. This Friday night. I have not decided what I'll be reading on Sunday, but I'm sure I will figure it out sooner rather than later. I appreciate you guys for being here. Thank you for spending a little time around the campfire with me this evening. If you enjoy the stories and would like to help support what I do here, please consider becoming a super fan or going and checking out the UndeadPapa mercantile for UndeadPapa merch, which I really appreciate those of you that have purchased so far. The support, it helps keep the campfire lit, and I greatly appreciate it. Well, until we meet again on Sunday, please be kind to each other and be kind to yourself, because kindness matters, and so do you. Good night, everybody.